This pandemic began, we were not sure how it spread. Everyone began wearing masks and using hand sanitizers, great ways to slow the spread, but a lot of people still get sick. I can personally attest to that. We now know that COVID 19 spreads via aerosols and droplets from the nose and mouth, and I've been thinking about this for a while. Why aren't we also sanitizing the nose and mouth, killing the virus directly at the place where it spreads? Why weren't more doctors thinking about this? Well, some doctors have done the research. Wish I discovered it sooner. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Halidine. It's an FDA-registered antiseptic for the nose and mouth that's proven to eliminate 99.99% of the virus that causes COVID-19 in just 15 seconds. That's right. It's created by a team of clinicians with decades of experience in antiviral treatments, initially created to protect healthcare workers. These are smart scientists, and it's a great product that also eliminates many other viruses and infecting particles. I'm using both their nasal antiseptic swab and their oral spray to help protect those around me, and you should be too. For others and for yourself. Whether you're hopping on a 3-hour flight, always use it there, visiting grandparents, or attending a meeting that you can't miss, Halidine's family of oral and nasal antiseptics give you the safe, easy, on-the-go antiviral protection for up to 4 hours. I encourage you to try Halidine at halidine.com today. My listeners get 10% off with the discount code Dr. Drew. That is HALODINE.com, discount code DRDREW. So obvious, it just makes sense. Stop the virus before it spreads and gets in your body with Halidine. Well, I too have struggled with GI issues over the years. I have something called Lynch syndrome, so gut health is extremely important to me. And while gut health awareness has increased, it's led to a wellness trend that's inspired a host of questionable marketing and some false claims. Now, you've seen the word probiotic attached to all kinds of supplements, drinks, even more. They may claim to deliver the healthy microorganisms our gut needs for proper function, but all too often the promises are in fact too good to be true. Thankfully, I became aware of a company called Seed and their flagship product, the Daily Synbiotic. Seed's Daily Synbiotic offers 24 clinically researched strains of microorganisms in a single dose. These strains support gut health and can improve regularity and relieve bloating, sometimes within as little as 24 to 48 hours. To me, what really sets Seed's Daily Synbiotic apart is the delivery system. While some products may offer the right strains, they're fragile, they rarely survive the trip through the gut, doesn't get where it needs to go, but Seed uses a capsule-in-capsule design that helps ensure the probiotic reaches your colon, which is where they often are needed. I've been taking Seed's Daily Symbiotic, and I really encourage you to check out their story and the science behind what they do. To try it for yourself, just go to seed.com/Dr. Drew. Use code Dr. Drew 20 for 15% off your first month of Daily Symbiotic. That is SEED.com/Dr. Drew. Use code Dr. Drew 20.
Hey everyone, it's a dose of Dr. Drew.
It is indeed, and we are going to be, in addition to streaming on all the usual platforms and watching you guys on Restream, we're going to be speaking with Steve Kirsch, who is going to be on Clubhouse. So if you want to join on Clubhouse and just hear the audio, that is available there. Steve, as you have known him from this stream before, is a strong advocate for the use of fluvoxamine, or at least for some sort of approval for it to be one of the things we consider using in the treatment of COVID-19. And of course, I used it for my long hauler symptoms, and it worked extraordinarily well, I would say. Before we go to Steve, remind everyone about our friends at Seed, which is a product I use on a daily basis. As you know, I'm a madman about UVC light, and I do believe this is your best product for that. And of course, Halidine to increase the efficacy of masks, which I'm driving Susan crazy about that to make her do it all the time, and Hydrolite, who I've been a long-term fan of. So let me bring our friend Steve Kirsch on up here. This is a little bit of a tricky maneuver from where I'm sitting.
See if it works.
Hold on.
Sorry, I wrote a word wrong on the intro.
We will never forgive you, Susan.
I know. I did it again.
Let's see if we can. Hey, Steve. Steve, are you on there?
It worked.
It does work, and we can hear you. Everything's working the way it's supposed to. So first of all, how are you?
I'm good. I've been skiing all day, so that was fantastic.
Do not rub it in. I just asked how you were, not how to make us feel bad.
Where do you ski?
He's in Aspen, right? You in Aspen? Oh, no, Star. North Star.
North Star.
North Star, right. We saw him on the slopes one time, remember?
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Yeah, don't even do it. Somebody's asking, did we see the CDC mask report on? Did you see a CDC mask report, Steve? I did not.
Oh yes, if you're vaccinated, you're free to unmask with other vaccinated people.
Right, I guess that's what they're talking about. Well, which is great. Unfortunately, they have not made any nod towards those of us who've had COVID, what we should be doing, which is kind of interesting. At least for 3 months, although most of the people that have gone through 3 months of immunogenic activity are finding out that they're going quite a bit longer. They're going 9 months, 12 months, 15 months. And so I guess they're worried about who has real neutralizing antibody capacity. We haven't really studied that when we've studied specifically the vaccine response. So they're afraid to say anything, which is kind of weird. It seems kind of weird to me. But anyway, a lot of things are weird. Like what happened to you on Facebook? Tell us that story.
Well, I was going to be on 60 Minutes on Sunday, and was in fact, on 60 Minutes last Sunday. And so I posted to my friends to be able to let them know, hey, I'm going to be on 60 Minutes. Please watch the episode. And, it's not every day that you're on 60 Minutes. I mean, the last time I was on 60 Minutes was 14 years ago. So, it's one of these rare things.
Just out of curiosity, what were you on it for?
Andy Rooney had a spot where he was talking. The name of the segment was "If I Were Rich," and so he was talking about rich people, and so he mentioned me and said that because I recently gave I think $1 million donation to the United Way because United Way was in a crisis, and he said if I had $100 million. That's what I would do. I would give it away. And so he mentioned my name, and he said that he liked me. And, Andy Rooney doesn't like a lot of people. So I felt honored.
That's nice. Did they interview you or just sort of pluck you out of the ethers?
No, I was watching 60 Minutes, and, and so it just came as a total surprise to have Andy Rooney talking about me on 60 Minutes. I mean, it was like, whoa.
So here we are. So now it's your next go around where you're actually going to be on this time. You're actually going to be interviewed. And you were interviewed for what?
I was interviewed because I started the COVID Early Treatment Fund, which is a charitable fund. And we fund scientists all over the world that are working on treatments for COVID. And so we received over 100 grant applications. We funded 14, and then we've only been able to raise a little bit over $5.5 million. So we've only been able to run 14 of those trials. But the first one to report out was Fluvoxamine, and that was super successful. And 60 Minutes heard about it and decided to do a story on it. So there's a fantastic story. They did just an amazing job of telling the story of Fluvoxamine in basically 12 minutes. It's a mind-blowing job.
Did they also talk about contrary opinions? In other words, were both sides of the issue explored?
Well, I'd say that they had the scientists talking about the trial, and they talked about patients, and they didn't go into the details, so they didn't talk about some of the specifics that perhaps you and I would be more interested in, which would be the symptomatic data, because especially long haul, since you're a long hauler, that none of the 77 patients had any long haul symptoms after 2 weeks on the drug. And 60% of the people who weren't on the drug had one or more symptoms after 2 weeks. And that's just mind-blowing. And if you do what's called a Fisher exact test, which is a way of assessing what's the statistical likelihood of that happening, it's 1 chance in 10 to the 14th.
Right.
So that's
that's
one with 14 zeros after it.
A vegantillion.
Yeah, it's basically, that is not going to happen ever, like in your lifetime.
Unless it's meaningful.
If it was by chance, unless it was real.
Right. And I can tell you, let me just anecdotally tell you that it not only does it prevent long haul, it seems to treat long haul. So for me, it was striking, and I ended up taking the drug just for 2 weeks, and then I kind of tapered down, and I didn't need it after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're not on it anymore?
No, I had when I told you I was starting it and I was improving, I was having really nasty symptoms. I mean, I was very fatigued by everything. The ringing in my ear was disturbing. My sleep was disrupted. My thinking was off. And I started it because one of the reasons I started is I knew I had a very, very big work schedule in New York City. It's now 2 weeks ago. So I wanted to be on the drug for a while before I went to New York, and lo and behold, my time in bed and on the couch and stuff started diminishing. I still needed a fair bit, but by the weekend before the big work schedule, I was feeling pretty good. And no, actually, no, I take it back. I take it back. I had been on it for more than 2 weeks as I moved into that New York trip, and I started to taper a little bit. I started playing around a little bit because I thought, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm going to do a big work schedule. Then I thought, I better not do this. I better first get through these 16-hour work days, which I did, and then I tapered off immediately after that. But the fact that I could get through those incredibly long work days was euphoric to me. It was a dramatic difference. Literally the week before, I would not have been able to do it. So over the 2 weeks I took, maybe 2.5 weeks I took the drug, there was a pretty dramatic improvement.
Yeah. So and part of the reason that you took that was because I was emailing you every day saying, "Did you take the drug?"
Well, to be fair to you, it wasn't just that. It was you going, "Don't let your brain be inflamed. You don't want to screw around with your brain." That specifically what got under my skin. And the good news about Fluvoxamine, I couldn't even have told you that I was taking it. I had no side effects, none whatsoever. And the issue, of course, with the serotonin reuptake inhibitors is you can get other side effects. You can get sexual dysfunction. You can get, manias. You can get anxiety. You can get all kinds of stuff. You get reduced anxiety too. And you can get a serotonin excess syndrome if you're not careful, and you can get serotonin withdrawal if you're not careful. I didn't get any of that stuff. None of it.
Yeah. But the dose that we gave you for COVID is 1/3 of the authorized dose.
I usually was using I was usually using 100. When I was using it therapeutically, I would generally use 100 milligrams. It seemed like I was using it 3 times a day back in the day, and I took 50 milligrams twice a day. That's all I took.
Right, which is and the FDA basically approves 300 milligrams a day, so you're taking 1/3 of the FDA approved dose, so you're taking a very low dose for a very short amount of time. Right. So that's why when people look at Fluvoxamine and they look it up on the internet and they see all these side effects and they're concerned like, oh my gosh, I don't want it. But those side effects are for people that are on the 300 milligram dose and have been taking it for months.
Yeah, and still, I mean. After you've seen a couple of serotonin syndromes or serotonin withdrawal syndrome, it gives you respect for these medications. Don't get me wrong, but I agree, very unlikely at these doses, very unlikely. So there you are. You're going on 60 Minutes, and you are enthusiastic about the research you have funded and the findings, and people like me are getting better from it. The 60 Minute sounds like the 60. I'm sorry, I didn't see the 60 Minute piece. Sounds like it was very, at least. If not open-ended, positive insofar as the data currently available, correct?
Yes. However, it's kind of ended by Francis Collins saying, well, we need more data.
Yeah, okay.
And,
I figured.
Let's wait for the phase 3 trial to complete. And what they don't do is they don't do anything to promote the phase 3 trial. And in fact, after the 60 Minutes piece aired, and that's like your biggest PR push, the number of people who enrolled in the trial that we could attribute to 60 Minutes was only 5 people. So and Francis Collins did encourage people to enroll in the clinical trial, but he only did that in the 60 Minutes overtime episode, which nobody saw.
Right.
So everybody thinks, oh, there's this trial going on, I'll just wait.
Right.
For it to finish.
Of course.
As opposed to we should go and enroll in the trial. And that's why only 5 people enrolled, because there was no, hey, if you really want this to happen faster, you should enroll in the trial. But in fact, when you have a p-value of 10 to the minus 14, there is no way any confounder, any kind of observer bias, any kind of placebo effect, any kind of healthy patient bias could possibly influence a 10 to the minus 14 p-value. And so what that means is that we're basically wasting time.
Well, let me put a little shine a little light on that point. What I find this is one of these issues that I find incredulous, and there's a lot of incredulity in your story, but in terms of how you were treated and what's going on with fluvoxamine. But for me personally, how my profession is behaving during this pandemic has been confusing is the kindest word I can give. If I had a long hauler symptom, a patient right now, which I do not, thankfully, I would categorically offer them fluvoxamine and discuss it with them and discuss the risk reward, and would say, we haven't completed the phase 3 trials yet, but I'm perfectly at my liberty to prescribe this off label. The data looks good to me. I had a great experience with it. I'd like to prescribe this for you. What happened to physicians using their judgment? Where did that go? It's just the most astonishing realization to me during this pandemic. And interestingly, surgeons have continued to use their judgment. Surgeons are improvising all over the place because that's what they do in a surgical arena. If something go bad, they figure it out and fix it. General medicine is no different. But my general medical peers have suddenly become strangely ossified. I've never seen anything like this. You should know that clinical experience, clinical use of a substance usually is well ahead of the science. That's usually how it goes. Usually we start doing things, and then we get the science to justifies what we're doing, or tells us to divert course. Maybe that's not such a good idea. Change course here. The science comes later, not first. Typically, but not now. So, Steve, what happened?
So I think hydroxychloroquine played a role in that, and when that was approved early and physicians started using it, they got burned because the David Boulware study, which I funded, came out and said, well, there's not a statistically significant improvement here. And in fact, if you look at the data for hydroxychloroquine, there was somewhat of a signal. It's just that it wasn't statistically significant. And it wasn't statistically significant because they just didn't have enough patients to be able to discern a relatively small effect. So we think the people that have looked at this actually believe that hydroxychloroquine does have a positive effect. It's probably around a 30% reduction. But if you have a small study, you can't see a 30% impact.
Right.
So for fluvoxamine, for example, we had 152 patients in the original study, and we could see a big signal because fluvoxamine was 100% protective against hospitalization. But when you have something that has a smaller effect size, to be able to see statistical significance requires a much larger study.
Right.
So what Boulware's study actually determined
Was nothing.
Was that it determined that we didn't have enough people to give you a statistically significant answer for hydroxychloroquine.
Right.
But we basically, in the number of people that we tested, we couldn't get a statistically significant impact of it. You know, it appears to be somewhat better, but we don't have statistical significance on it. So people then interpreted that as, well, it doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, I looked at that. Okay, I looked at that data and was that's the immediate response I felt from it, the immediate way I interpreted what was there. So it was just this very strange time where if Trump said something positive about anything, everybody had to do the opposite, and anybody that did anything approximating his behavior was vilified and called, a Nazi and a pro-Trump and whatever. I just heard a lecture from a woman who was very deep into the data around schools, and she, around the time that Trump came out in favor of schools, She had concluded that schools were very safe to open, that we were one of the outlying countries to have closed them as long as we did. We should open them immediately. And then Trump came forward and said, and by the way, she had this huge fan base of people getting behind her, agreeing with her. Trump came out and said, open schools. Immediately she was vilified. All her fans asked what was wrong with her. How could you have that opinion? Same fans. It's really kind of extraordinary. And so something about all of this is the political energy that was going around at the time. I hope people look back and assess their behavior during this and take a good look at it, because it didn't help people.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the Trump inverse halo effect.
Right, exactly. It's a derangement. It was a derangement. It was a hysteria is what it was, where you have to hysterically respond the opposite direction, and we have moved into hysteria. We clearly have sort of moved from narcissism to a tendency towards delusional hysterias, and you are in the middle of that, sir. So tell us what happened next with your Facebook post.
Well, it got censored, I think, within less than maybe 8 hours, or maybe it was 4 hours from when I posted it. I found that it had been removed. And I got a warning on Facebook saying if my account that this posting was removed because it violated community standards, and that if I got other warnings that my account may be canceled, or my posting privileges may be canceled, and so forth. So it's kind of like, here's your shot across the bow. We removed your post, and so then I appealed.
Hang on, before you talk about the appeal, hold on a second. And Susan, we had a similar situation, did we not? But that was with YouTube, correct?
Yes.
And we got we were
unable to post for a week.
You're putting a penalty box. We were putting a penalty box.
And now, every time we do a local show, which is weird, we don't get monetized. So I wonder if they think that's a sexual thing. I'm not sure. Locals. Like when we say we're zooming with locals.
I don't think that really matters. I don't think the monetizing matters, because, and I've talked to a former VP of engineering, Jeff Rothschild. Used to be a big shot at Facebook, and I talked to him about it, and he said, look, all of these social networks are under tremendous pressure, political pressure, to essentially make sure that their platforms are not spreading any medical misinformation.
Mm-hmm. But how do they?
What happens is
go ahead. What happens is
they take this big hammer. They take the big hammer, and the problem is that in stomping out the bad stuff, they take the baby out with the bathwater.
Mm-hmm. So who is putting such pressure on?
So here's
them?
I want to put up his post just so everybody
can see it. And by the way,
see
Susan, there's a weird. Okay. Hang on.
So I will be featured on 60 Minutes this Sunday.
Susan, there's a weird border on the screen that blocks half the screen.
All right, I'll read it. It says, I will be featured on 60 Minutes this Sunday talking about Fluvoxamine as an effective treatment for COVID-19 to prevent hospitalization and death. Please watch and tell your friends. More info about Fluvoxamine for COVID, see, his link. I mean, come on.
So there it is, just a very simple statement. And
it wasn't like he was going, okay, everybody, go buy Fluvoxamine.
I think your mistake was saying effective. You know what I mean?
No, to prevent hospitalization and death.
I think as soon as you say something, if there's anything
treatment,
anything approaching categorical, that's when they boom. That's I think where it comes in. You have to qualify.
Yeah, I probably should have said as a not effective treatment, or you have to say might be an effective treatment.
Yeah.
But in fact, when you have
could be
when you have 10 to the minus 14 p-value, I don't know how much more certain you can get at that point. Right, because the vaccine is only a p-value of like 10 to the minus 4, right? And this is 10 to the minus 14. Now, you're allowed to talk about the vaccine because that's certain. That's 10 to the minus 4.
Right.
But something that's 10 to the minus 14, that's just speculation.
But that was 10 to the minus 14 in a provisional study, not a phase 3 trial, right? And so that's.
But it doesn't matter.
I agree with you.
It's a real trial.
Yes.
And you can't attack the evidence. The evidence is the evidence.
But they can't.
I have
so
not talked to any.
Who is putting them under all this pressure? Where is that pressure coming from? And why do they feel it?
There isn't a particular person or an agency. I think it's the general fear of some politician trying to get a lot of publicity for going after these evil social networks. So it's the general anybody in Congress who goes after social networks. Isn't
there one of their more, I get that, it gives them kind of a foothold, but isn't one of the most serious and swirling criticisms is their excessive use of censorship?
Exactly. It's a catch-22 here. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
So how did they determine that you were outside of their policy? Who was it? An algorithm or was it a person? And where are these people? And how did they do that?
So I have no clue as to who they use. There have been articles. That have been written about who they use, but I don't have any personal knowledge of that. And but I do know that when you go through the appeals process, it says, hey, thanks for your appeal. We have a lot of appeals, and we don't have much staff for that. So it could take a very long time.
Are you still under appeal?
I am, as far as I know, I am. Yeah.
And that's in spite of you contacting one of the executives at Facebook.
The reason I contacted the executive at Facebook was because they were blocking our ads to advertise the clinical trial. Okay, so doing 60 Minutes basically did 5 enrollments. Okay, we need 1,000 people. So what we found is that Facebook ads are the most effective because we can target them to people who are searching for COVID because they just got infected, or they're posting something about I just got COVID. And so we can then hit them with an ad saying, if you just got COVID, then please enroll in our clinical trial. So what Facebook was doing was blocking our ads. So all the scientists are saying, we need phase 3 trials, and I'm saying, no, we don't, 10 to the minus 14, you should pay attention, look at the evidence. So nobody in the world, except for one guy who I asked to look at the evidence, I said, can you look at this evidence and say, I think it's 10 to the minus 14. He said, yeah, you're right. 10 to the minus 14, there are no confounders. This thing's a no-brainer. It shouldn't take the FDA more than a few seconds to realize this. So the FDA has been sitting on it, on our EUA application for 5 weeks and not telling us anything. It's kind of goofy that they're not only did Facebook block my 60 Minutes post, but Facebook is blocking the very thing that Francis Collins says is the most important, which is for people to enroll in the clinical trial. So Francis Collins on 60 Minutes is saying, yes, people should enroll in these trials, and yet Facebook is blocking the ads to tell people about the clinical trials because Francis Collins isn't talking about the clinical trials. And so our number one source of people into this trial so that we can save hundreds of thousands of lives and do what the medical community wants us to do is being blocked by Facebook.
And explain to people who the Dr. Collins is.
Francis Collins is the head of the NIH, so right. He's the top dog. The buck stops there.
Right. And how do you feel about all this? To me, nothing else. This stuff affects me profoundly. I'm realizing that now, as I look back over this last couple of years, I have no feelings about Trump or Biden or Pelosi or anybody. What I have feelings about is the way the press behaved, how they panicked people so badly that they froze my profession, and that real information, or at least discursive information, was censored that could have really helped people. I'm just I think about it and I get just really upset, really angry when I think about it. How do you experience this?
Well, it's I'm angered by the medical community ignoring the evidence on fluvoxamine and nobody looking at the data, and so that.
Well, listen. Hey. By the way, you should listen. You're not alone, Steve. Did you read what's going on with that antiviral that Merck is producing? Did you see that?
No, you're talking about the EIDD.
I can get you the name of
drug?
it. Yeah, I don't remember the name of it.
It's a pill.
It's a pill. Yeah, it's a pill. And they had some observational data, sort of phase 2 data, that was incredible. And all that's pouring out of the press is, can't tell yet, impossible to say, got to make sure these people actually get well. We're going to have to do lots more study. Got to complete phase 3. They are falling on themselves to crush the story. And Merck's doing it themselves. So you got to read some of the. I'm going to send you an article about that. It's really, when you hear their language, it's astonishing. Like, yeah, everybody got well. Stop this. It literally put the nasal viral load to 0 within 5 days in all cases. But we can't tell whether that means anything. We got to. Yeah, I mean, really, it's the same thing you guys are dealing with.
And you're saying that Merck is saying, well, we don't know whether it works or not.
It's molnupiravir. Thank you, Stanley.
Right.
Molnupiravir. And
I wonder if anybody on that.
Merck and multiple other agencies everybody's going out of their way to make sure nobody looks upon that data optimistically. I look at it and I go, here it is. This is it. This is going to be our therapeutic. Yeah. This is it. You're going to have fluvoxamine for the long haulers. You're going to have molnupiravir for the acute illness. Oh my God, this is going to be fantastic. No, sorry.
That's right. And the reason for that, because I experienced this firsthand, is that any reputable scientist worth their salt would insist, they would quit if the press release says, well, this looks like people should take this looks really promising. Like every scientist would basically say, oh, we have to be like super careful, we can't overpromise, we have to be super conservative. So even it's like with fluvoxamine, like it was 100% effective. And then Seftel's study came after it, and it was 100% effective there. It was like, this is like off the charts.
Yes, I know. But
when the doctors talk about it, they say, well, we're going to have to wait for phase 3 data to be sure.
I mean, imagine
but
Steve.
You can't explain.
Yeah, I imagine, Steve, you're a physician. You have this terribly sick patient. He's 68 years old and he's going down fast. I want to get my hands on that stuff. I want the Regeneron. I want the molnupiravir. And if he makes it through, we're going to be thinking about fluvoxamine later. I mean, why not? What is the downside to getting a little aggressive with a serious illness that has a lot of morbidity and mortality? I can't believe it.
The downside is reputational risk. So it's like, why isn't fluvoxamine even mentioned on the NIH guidelines? It's a no-brainer. It's like there's no downside for this drug. The drug's been around for 37 years. This drug is safer than Tylenol. There have been no reported deaths from an overdose from fluvoxamine ever.
Yeah.
And Tylenol kills 500 people a year.
That's true.
500 people a year you kill. Yeah. That's an over-the-counter medication.
Yep.
That's safe.
Yep.
So true.
No problem.
Let's see if anybody on Clubhouse wants to chime in on this.
Fluvoxamine kills nobody.
Okay.
And so to say that this is, you're exactly right. There is no downside to trying this drug. And gosh, if it works as promised, and there's 99.99999999999% chance that it does, well, why wouldn't you take it?
I did. Listen, not only why wouldn't I did. I took it. But
it took a while. It took a lot.
Well, that was more an issue of medical management. That you gotta.
He had taken so much that week that he was worried.
Well, not only that, and it's funny. My physician brought it up to me. He brought it up, and I was really happy when he did. I said, "That's it.
Really?
That's the one." Yeah,
I didn't know that.
we discussed, what the long hauler syndrome is about, what my predominant symptoms were. He actually brought up, he gave me a couple of choices. We were talking about steroids again. We were talking about ivermectin. And then fluvoxamine came in. I was like, that Steve will be so happy.
As a matter of
well,
fact.
And by the way, Steve, one of my other reasons for doing it was I wanted to be a subject. I wanted to help push this forward a little bit. For instance, one way or the other, if I have a response, that's an important, meaningful experience that I could then represent for other people that might help them.
You were transformed.
And kudos to you for doing that. That's awesome.
He was transformed, Steve. You saved him.
I wish more doctors would do the same thing.
Yeah. So the good news is my guy mentioned it. I don't want to out him here. I don't know if he's obviously willing to improvise, which is others are not. So people at Clubhouse, you guys are in the audience that are listening. If you want to come up and join Steve and myself on the line here, if you
talk about this,
to talk about this topic, this is all we're talking about right now. Maybe later I'll talk about other things. But right now we're talking about the fluvoxamine, the censoring, what to do with long haulers, that sort of thing.
Medical.
Susan, what?
Medical misinformation. Like, what is that?
Medical misinformation, and it's not even so much the misinformation, frankly, because really bad ideas and supplements are alive and well on the internet. Strangely, I mean, very alive and well. And yet people discussing legitimate medical issues are the ones being censored. But anyway, raise your hand, and if you're interested in being a part of the conversation, I will bring you up to the
What does
stage.
it mean when they have a little,
I don't know.
Happy horn?
I don't know what that means.
What is that?
I don't know what that means. But here is Sandra, I think is the name. Again, I can't quite read it.
We spelled worthy. Oh, no, we didn't spell it.
Sandra, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, I'm curious what you think the solution would be, because I understand the problem as far as censoring, good, accurate information like you're speaking of. But I also feel like the misinformation out there is so dangerous. So
Yeah, you know what?
do you feel would be the solution?
Good for you for asking that question. Thank you for asking that. And I'm going to put you back in the audience because that's a complicated question that I think that's why we haven't gotten to it yet. But let's get to it. So, Steve, go ahead. What would you say?
Well, so I was censored on Nextdoor as well, and I had the opportunity to contact the CEO there, who then put me in touch with one of their senior moderators, and we had a nice discussion about how they can improve their platform. Because, and I did the same thing on for YouTube. It just took a lot longer. So on YouTube, complained to executive, finally got routed to an executive who would listen to, hey, here's the problem, here's what you can do about it. So these platforms, Facebook, I've never been able to talk to anybody I was banned for life on Medium, and I tried to appeal that, and that was unsuccessful, and I thought their process was horrible. But in general, the process, I get what the problem is one of scale, that there's this massive amount of content on these platforms, and these platforms have only a finite number of people, trying to manage all that content. And so the problem is one of how do you handle this misinformation at scale? And so typically the way that it's done is that somebody hits the I think this is medical information button. And so that then brings it to the attention of one of the censors. And depending on the platform, so for Nextdoor, if you complain on medical misinformation, it gets routed not to the local censor, which would normally be the case, but it gets routed to this special bank of censors who are supposed to be trained in medical misinformation. And they basically say, is this on the NIH guidelines? If it's not on the NIH guidelines, then I need to quash it because it can't be valid stuff. So if you're talking about ivermectin, you'll get killed on YouTube, for example. And so they view that as their holy grail. And I said, look, I've written a really good Quora post, and it goes through all of the not all of them, but the most interesting drugs that have been proven scientifically to be effective against COVID in one way or another. It could be an observational study, it could be a randomized clinical trial, but these are all drugs with a valid case for being used against COVID. And so for next door, they said, great, we'll adopt that list as our list that we use, and if it's not on that list, then we could censor it, as opposed to using the CDC list, which is super conservative. So that's a step in the right direction, is just having the right list. The second thing, and the most important thing, is that when someone complains about medical misinformation, they should specify exactly what they think is medical misinformation. And it shouldn't be, I think this is medical misinformation, and leave it at that, right? Because what happens is that the people that get censored just say, well, you were censored because you violated community standards. And you have no idea what you did wrong. So
Right.
you can't even correct it, and
That
you
was
can't
me.
appeal it. It's as if you were in a country where they said, yeah, you're under arrest because you broke the law.
Yeah.
You'd want to know what law you broke.
Right.
But on these platforms, they don't tell you. They just say you broke the law, and if you want to defend yourself, you can do that. But we're not going to tell you which law you broke.
Well,
And it's
YouTube
really ridiculous.
YouTube sent me their whole list of standards, and they were things I would never do. The only thing I could find that I was close to was discussing my own immunological status vis-a-vis recovering from COVID, and when I should get a vaccine, and how I can follow my antibodies and cellular immunities. That's it. I was just discussing biology.
Not allowed to talk about that.
I don't know. This is deeply concerning. But that still doesn't tell me how we effectively control misinformation. I don't.
Well, right, but what we're trying to do is improve the process that they have right now.
Right.
So they have a process, and the problem is that the process sucks.
Yes, it sucks.
I mean, I can even say that word here because
Yes,
we're
you
not
can.
getting censored. So the
Yeah.
process sucks, and it's like and they probably have no clue as to why it sucks, right? Because they're not on the receiving end. But if you're on the receiving end of it, you say, well, tell me what I did wrong so I can fix it, or at least give you an intelligent appeal
Right.
as to why you're wrong.
Yes.
And
yes.
then ideally, then someone should go and look at that. Someone very neutral, who wasn't the censor himself, but should be, like a senior censor, should look at it and say, oh, okay, the guy who complained had this specific reason for complaining.
Right.
And the guy who got censored had this thing that says, here's why it's legitimate. And then what should happen is you should get a reputation, right? Like if you're a doctor, if you've got an MD, there should be a really wide latitude, and it should be, unless you get 10 complaints, they shouldn't do anything. But they don't. The first complaint is you're dead,
Right.
right? So
That's
they
right.
don't have this status system where it says, hey, if you've got an MD and you're a doctor and you're talking about medical stuff, it should be okay.
Or if you're an MD and you're talking to other MDs about your experience or something, what you've done, what you've tried and
right.
done and read in the literature and
Yeah.
stuff. That's how medicine is
so-
done. That's how it's done. I think if anything,
And so
it
there's-
has to be outside of the routine scope of practice. Something all alien to what we normally do. Seems to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so there isn't any of that reputational stuff. So let me say this. If you happen to be Francis Collins, the head of the NIH,
Yeah.
right? The buck stops here.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, whatever, you could get censored because they don't know who you are.
That's right. They don't. Well, no, they don't know. They don't. They don't care. They don't care who you
Yeah,
are.
They're just following the rules. Oh, this guy's talking about ivermectin, censor him, right?
And
So there is no
why?
reputation.
Why? And I think it's sort of obvious, but I'll ask the question: why can people make incredulous claims on all sorts of other nutritional and biological aspects of medicine, but this one area we have to have some sort of Gestapo orientation to the control of the information that's being discussed, not advocated, discussed.
Yes, because the answer to that is because this is a pandemic, and they don't want to, and there's a tendency to everybody's interested in this because, right, everybody can potentially get COVID. So because of the extreme interest in it, it gets top priority for censorship. And, probably in 5 years from now, they will censor, everything else. But for now, they're putting a big priority on COVID because it's top of mind for people. Right, so it affects the greatest number of people. And if I talked about fluvoxamine and I said, God forbid, that if you got COVID, you should get fluvoxamine. By the way, which you should do, and I can say that because I'm not being censored on this platform. There's absolutely no doubt. There isn't a single piece of evidence. Nothing. There is no randomized trial. There's not even a single patient who had a bad experience on fluvoxamine. Everybody who took fluvoxamine who had COVID got better.
Yeah.
So it's
and ivermectin.
It's crazy that we can't that we're now allowed.
No,
to,
ivermectin's ivermectin's actually a much more complicated story.
Yeah,
it's more controversial.
Yeah, and I would argue that if this Merck drug comes through the way my reading of the data suggests it will, which I don't know, I don't saying that it will, I'm saying my reading of the data suggests to me it's going to be a pretty exciting treatment. All these other issues are going to go away because no one's going to be interested in using these things. There's such a much more superior product out there. Again, it's us trying to improvise ways to help patients. That's what we're trying to do. That's the whole goal here.
Right. And by the way, you should be able to get the Merck drug. So there's this thing called the Right to Try Act. And the Right to Try Act says that if you are in danger of dying and there's a clinical trial on a drug that is not yet available, but the drug is available in clinical trials, then you have the right to use that drug and to request it from the drug company.
Let me tell you the crazy wrinkle in that. I love that you brought that up, but the time to use this drug is very early in the illness when there's large-scale viral replication. Once you get into the cytokine activation, you start dying. It's not likely to do anything. So you have to, but they won't give it to you unless you're dying. You know what I mean? That's the group that gets the drug. So this is ridiculous.
Right. So catch-22. Right.
Yeah.
They did the exact same thing with remdesivir. Right. Remdesivir was proven to work if you gave it very early.
Yeah.
They tested it in monkeys, which is the closest that they could get to humans, and it was transformative. If you gave remdesivir, like, all the monkeys had a happy time with the virus. It's like none of this long haul COVID, nobody got hospitalized. It's like, it was night and day. So what did they do? They approved remdesivir only for severely hospitalized patients.
Right.
So this is the equivalent of saying, hey, we have a life preserver. And if you go overboard, we're only allowed to give you the life preserver only if you're 30 feet under the water.
Or you're frozen solid and dying of hypothermia.
Right.
Then we'll send it to you.
Reach the life preserver.
Yeah.
And then we'll give it to you when there's no chance that we could possibly save your life. So what they did is they basically wasted all of this precious remdesivir, and they gave it to the people that couldn't benefit from it. I mean, this is our medical system. I mean, it's at its finest.
Well, to be fair, that stuff, when I hear about stuff like that, and you're right, it is our medical system, but it's our medical system under the burden of our legal system, and which is a different issue than what I've been seeing during COVID, which, as you say, has been a reputational burden. It's what Alexis de Tocqueville talked about in 1829. He said that Americans have the most explicit free speech in the law, and in actuality, no free speech because of the effect of the town square, the common square. He said that people will yell you down, people will not let you express unpopular ideas, and here we are. So we have, on one hand, the medical system being burdened by legal priorities, and the other is the reputational and lack of free speech because of the pressure of the square. Crazy, right?
Yeah, but I think that, to be fair, my opinion on remdesivir is simply one of people didn't care about early treatment, and people were dying in the hospital. And so the emergency was, oh, how do we save people in the hospital? And so they said, we have this drug
Right.
remdesivir, which works on early cases. Maybe we'll try it on
I get that.
cases.
I get that.
And,
But
it was never tested. It was never tested on human beings early stage.
yeah.
Right, because it's too complicated, because it requires an infusion to deliver it. But there is a drug called GS441524, and we funded the research on that drug, and it's a precursor for remdesivir. And it's a generic antiviral against RNA viruses. So it's like that Merck drug that we can't pronounce. And so it should be equally effective. So that Merck drug is a general antiviral for RNA viruses, just like GS441524. So, there you go. There's another drug for you.
Do you have any other stuff that you're funding? Any other research that you're excited about that you can talk about?
Well, look, I think the answer, my personal view is that the way I would if I were in charge, it seems pretty clear to me how we should attack this virus. And let me give you an example first with fire. So in fire, we all learned in school that you need three things for a fire. You need heat, you need fuel, and you need oxygen. And you could stamp out a fire if you get rid of the oxygen, if you get rid of the fuel, or if you get rid of the heat. And so what happens is you typically put out a fire because you attack it one of the three ways. You try to remove one of those. But for really hard fires, and a really hard fire would be HIV. The problem with drugs is that drugs are never 100 or almost never 100%. Because when drugs are 100%, they not only kill the virus, but they also kill you.
Right.
Because they shut down all these processes and so forth.
Right.
And so any given drug against any part of the virus will typically be less than 100%. So what you really want to do is you want to attack the virus in multiple fronts, just like you would attack a fire, by saying, let's try to remove as much oxygen from the room as we can. We can't remove 100%, but let's try to remove at least 90%. Let's try to remove most of the fuel. Let's try to remove most of the heat. And so for a virus, it's really the same thing, that there are various ways of attacking the virus. So you could attack it with a generic antiviral like this Merck drug. You could attack it with a specific antiviral like a monoclonal antibody, which is something that you got. You could attack it with an interferon activator like a PEG interferon lambda, which will then improve your immune system's response to be able to fight the virus. And you can attack it with an anti-inflammatory like a Fluvoxamine or a Prozac, or a metformin or a doxazocin. And so, those are ways to address the inflammation part that does the most damage. And so there are I think there are 5 different ways that we can attack the virus. And we have drugs for each of those 5 different ways.
Right.
And so if you got infected, and by the way, all of these drugs have very, very low side effect profile, right? They all have been used in lots and lots of patients. They have very, very low side effect profile. So if you took one drug from each category, you are guaranteed there's I would be placing my money on you rather than the virus.
Right.
Because you're attacking the virus, you're cutting off the fingers, you're putting an arrow through its heart, you're putting a bullet through its brain, and you're cutting off both of its legs. Now do you think the virus has a chance after that? Because you couldn't put the bullet in exactly the right part of the brain, and you couldn't put your arrow right in the middle of the heart, right?
Right.
And so the point is that when you hit it with all of those things simultaneously, the virus doesn't have a chance. So the other ones are TMPRSS2 inhibitors, and so there's some other things, and it's all documented. If people want to go to my website, it's skirsch.io, and if you click on the FAQ, it describes all the different drugs for each of the different mechanisms.
And-
So the logical thing to do is to say, look, let's hit this like the way we treated HIV. The way we finally won against HIV was to take David Ho's advice. And David Ho's advice was, let's hit HIV fast and hard. And everybody remembers that famous editorial that David Ho wrote, with that title. And that really changed how people thought about HIV because they were using single agents against HIV.
Right.
But it was this multi-agent approach that
which
really,
you should be. I think I expressed to you before is a sort of a general philosophical approach to pathogens. When we choose antibiotics, we choose multiple different pathways to attack the bacterium, and that's you ever heard of triple antibiotics? That is these different ways of getting at the bug. And we've done that for decades. That's been the sort of axiomatic principle of infectious disease.
Yeah, it's brain dead obvious as to how you would attack this.
Mm-hmm.
And so why isn't there? So there should be a clinical trial for outpatients that combines drug A, drug B, and drug C. Like a 3-drug combo, or a 4-drug combo, or a 5-drug combo. You see, okay, 5-drug combo. Oh, we got 100% in.
The only wrinkle to this I would offer is that there are two really distinct phases of this illness, right? And they have different needs. The cytokine inflammatory activation has a whole different set of treatment needs. That's where the steroids and everything else comes in.
Correct. Yeah. But it's important to treat this, but you treat it the same way. It doesn't matter because you treat the same way, because when you have inflammation, you want to treat that inflammation starting on day one when I first realized, oh shit, I have symptoms. Well, you have symptoms because of the inflammatory response. So you want to hit it on day one with inflammation, with an anti-inflammatory, and so you also want to hit it with an antiviral because you're super late in that as well.
Right.
But hey, fine. Look, you can do no harm here. And the antiviral, if you're lucky and your symptoms, you caught it early enough, the antiviral can make a difference. So I would argue that the point is that we should be looking at this by saying, look, this is the heart, this is the brain, this is the legs, and let's attack all of these simultaneously. But we don't. These combos that you have with hydroxychloroquine, we'll add doxycycline, or we'll add vitamin D, or we'll add, these are like, come on, guys, these are like rounding error drugs, and it's not being done methodically.
But it was also we're desperate to help where we can.
Yeah, it's like, well, I think this might work, and I think this might work, and I think this might work, but we should be doing it very methodically.
But it is interesting, though.
We read that FAQ document. It's very methodical.
And again, we were allowed to. You're talking about your stuff on your Kirsch.io, yes? That article.
Yeah, in the FAQ.
Yeah,
Chinese menu.
And yet supplements were allowed to be discussed.
One drug from each row.
Supplements were allowed to be discussed in an unrestricted way, but anything that had any sort of pharmacological quality to it, no, that you can't discuss. Weird, just weird to me. I'm going to bring somebody up on the stage with Anthony. I see your hand up here. You're on with Steve Kirsch, Anthony. Anthony, let's see. It's easier said than done. Anthony, you on there?
Can you hear me?
I hear you now, buddy. What's happening?
Hey, I'm just like hanging out at the hospital listening to you guys chop it up about all this medication and stuff. And I'm glad we're still dealing with finding some remedies to COVID. But, I'm trying to move forward and look at what's going to be the long-term effect. Like, what's the solution to all this depression and, alcoholism and all that stuff that we get to experience since we are finally coming out of being locked down.
Got any ideas, Anthony?
I think we should just jump in, both feet forward. A lot of times people are getting really anxious and apprehensive about going back to work when the restrictions say that we can mingle with each other.
Yeah.
So, I think people should just go ahead and get involved and don't second guess it. If you get vaccinated, come on out.
Yeah. All right, I agree with you, Anthony, and we'll. This is a topic we'll all be dealing with more as we go forward, for sure. But I appreciate you bringing that up. And then Leopold is asking, what's the mechanism for fluvoxamine for long haulers? Steve, you want to talk about the sigma-1 receptor? Steve, are you there?
Yeah.
You're tired, and then I'll let you go.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Then I'll let you go after you talk about anti-inflammatory
Can
effects.
you hear me?
I do. I hear you.
Yeah. So the mechanism, so the mechanism for fluvoxamine is primarily one of serotonin modulation, but it's also the this sigma-1 receptor. So if you activate the sigma-1 receptor, then it's almost like calling the fire department. So it shuts down the inflammatory response, and so. It was a sigma-1 receptor that was the key in the original study in the University of Virginia, and Gaultier's lab, where in 2019 he found that fluvoxamine was a potent activator of sigma-1,
and then this was all published in the New England Journal at that time. Yes.
Yeah, I don't remember where it was published, but it was definitely published in 2019.
Yeah.
If you go to my website, you'll get a reference to that paper. But so he was the one who discovered that by activating sigma-1, that you could basically calm down the inflammation from sepsis. So this is a big deal. So for people who are long haulers, what's interesting is there are a couple things going on. One is that they are getting excess inflammatory response, which is causing all sorts of havoc through their body. So using an anti-inflammatory like a fluvoxamine or a Prozac will calm that down. And the second aspect, which people are starting now to discover, is that long-haul COVID actually has undetectable by normal PCR levels of the virus that are still hiding out. And so that's why people are having these long-term impacts, because the virus is still there, but the PCR is just not picking it up. And there's this company, and I'm blanking on their name, but they have this really sensitive assay for picking up the virus. And so it's quite reasonable that using an antiviral against COVID will be effective for long haulers. So this Merck drug, for example, may be really, really good for long haulers.
Yeah, I think
that was the answer for how fluvoxamine works is basically it's anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, it's anti-inflammatory through a novel receptor. Novel receptor
novel
system.
receptor.
Steve, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to call some of the people in the audience back up here, but I really appreciate you spending a little time with us. Again, the websites where you'd like people to go?
Yeah, Kirsch, that's SKIRSCH.io, and it's a treasure trove of information about fluvoxamine and also how to treat COVID.
All right, my friend. We'll talk soon.
All right, thanks.
Take care. All right, that is Steve Kirsch.
He's not a medical doctor.
He is not a medical doctor. He's been funding medical research around COVID. Obviously, very knowledgeable about the viral issues around virology.
So he won't lose his
treatment.
license if he talks about it.
Right, correct.
I think that's the problem. Is doctors can't talk about it because they will be called quacks.
Well,
and lose
remember
their
that doctor we had on here from Minnesota who was having to defend his license? He's getting screwed again. He's once again having to defend himself. So let me look at what's going on in the Clubhouse room here. Those of you on Clubhouse, if you'd like to come up and ask questions, now we can talk about more general topics if you wish. I see you here, and just raise your hand, and I'll bring you up. But if you come up onto the out of the audience, you will be agreeing to be on the YouTube, Twitch.
Chad Quackenbush got his Johnson & Johnson vaccine. He gave us $5 to tell us that on YouTube, and also did a super chat, said, could we have a conversation about food addiction sometime? Am I the only one who feels like food is killing me?
I think that's a reasonable
truly
thing.
believe it.
That's a reasonable thing.
Yeah, we're all getting fat. It's true.
Well, and Joe has wanted to do something about that too, so that's reasonable. Again, those of you on Clubhouse, if I call you up out of the audience, we'll be streaming on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope. Right now, nobody has their hand up, so I'm going to keep chatting here.
Talk to Restreams.
Yeah, let me look at the Restream.
Somebody on here said nobody wants to talk about COVID anymore. I think, agree.
Yeah, I understand that, but we're at the finish line. We're at the victory line here. Now is the time we got to really finish the conversation a little bit. Hold on a second.
Turn off the sound while you diddle with that.
I know, while I bounce around. Okay. Should have Vinny Tortorich. Susan, as a request for Vinny. I believe he's in town. Maybe he can help us. Leopold, I lost 200 pounds. Have you tried OA? That's Leopold talking to someone talking about food addiction. OA does work. OA is a community mutual aid society 12-step that for real addictive eaters, it does help tremendously. Yes, obesity was a risk factor for COVID illness, and we see in illnesses in countries that are thin, less COVID, less severe COVID. Shocking. What's the best way to help long haulers? Cindy, follow Dr. Yo, Y-O, doctor, word spelled out, D-O-C-T-O-R, Yo, Dr. Yo. He is developing a whole community of long haulers and a lot of suggestions for it. For myself, Fluvoxamine was very helpful. There's a lot of other things being discussed that might be helpful as well. They now have essentially characterized the the cytolog, well, what do we call it? The inflammatory profile of people with long haulers, and are learning how to adjust it. Okay, Stanley's worried about COVID because of his weight. I agree with that. I'm with you. Keep the COVID shows coming. We need to shame the media control freaks who essentially killed tens of thousands. Yeah. I'm afraid so, Demuzio. I'm afraid so. It's really frustrating for me.
Demuzio?
Drew
Demuzio.
I spoke to somebody who's a friend today who has a loved one, young person, dying of COVID because his doctors were afraid to do anything when he first got sick for weeks.
Really?
Yes, this is happening all the time.
They treated it like the flu.
No, they were, the orthodoxy is a young, healthy person, don't do anything. Don't do anything.
Oh.
Let it run. Let it ride. He'll be fine.
True.
As opposed to when they start going, not being able to identify when they go into the inflammatory stage of the illness and start treating that aggressively. And by aggressively, safe things like Decadron. Fluvoxamine, bamlanivimab. These things are very, very, very safe. So very, very painful for me to hear about
the person died?
Not yet, but it's just bad situation.
A young person?
Yes.
Oh.
And so, again, no hands up in the clubhouse room. You got it's Anthony. Anthony, you want to get back up here again? I'm heading towards wrapping things up.
I got to send Dr. Yo over to it.
Very quickly, I am still doing the Fox 11 show here locally in Los Angeles, but only for 3 more days. Tuesday, 4 more days. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 more days. And then I'll be occasionally a contributor, but I'm stopping the nightly anchoring.
That's so sad.
Some people, there it is, there's my partner, Alex. And some people have expressed that to me. I'm not sad.
You didn't expect it to go this long.
It was a 2-week experiment that went for a year. I feel good about what we did. Ron Kentu, could I speak more about being histrionic, hysterical, fearful is gratifying to some? You discussed it on Amadrew. Okay, Roy, just 1 second. Joe Giannotti, where are we going to go for our COVID information? Because COVID tracking seems to have wrapped up, and I've been walking around the CDC site, and it's impossible to get the same kind of information off of it. They've got some, it's up to date, and they've got good data, but it's not laid out well where you can really figure out what's going on in each state, compare it day by day. So, Joe Giannotti, you're going to tell me where to go. Send me a DM where I should be getting my COVID information, epidemiological information. So, back to histrionics. I do believe, thanks, Joe. I do believe that we have moved from narcissism to histrionic in the sense that we clearly had a narcissistic turn where narcissistic disorders were the predominant personality issue of the day. And in the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen delusional thinking, hysterical panic, gratification by these extreme fear reactions, and then going back to the press for more and more and more, and being gratified by sort of participating in the hysteria and the delusions. I've said it repeatedly. That if somebody 4 years ago came to me and talked to me about believing that a U.S. leader was a Hitler and there were Nazis everywhere, I would put you in the hospital. Now, say what you will, that thinking about everything being Nazi and fascist on either side, I don't care who's thinking it, that's disturbed thinking. That's disturbed thinking. And we have to be very careful about the histrionics, and the hysteria we've gotten into, generated probably from the press, has killed people for sure, and caused us to close our schools down and harm our children. So call me crazy. I think this was the huge misadventure. Not just it was, and make no mistake, it's a nasty illness. I had it. It's a pandemic. Pandemics suck. They're dangerous. They kill people. That's the way it goes. That's what happens. That's what makes a pandemic a pandemic. Excess deaths above baseline. That's what defines a pandemic. But we did a lot of other stuff on top of that hurt us, as Anthony was mentioning, from a mental health standpoint. And we have to deal with that. We froze physicians' ability to improvise, so people are dying from that. They're worried about their reputation and being called out on social media. They are fearful of stepping out of some orthodoxy that's way behind where it should be, and people are dying because they're not improvising in the meantime. I mean, there's just so much going on here. The result of what seems to be an hysteria. There's sort of a general hysteria underway. I think we're settling. I think as the pandemic has gone down and as the administration has changed,
and we have cures for it,
and as the treatments and the vaccine, I think we're settling.
Should I not say cures?
Treatments, but I think that's great, and we're settling down. But we should examine ourselves. We should look at the mistakes we made, and if something scary happens again, don't make those mistakes. Don't do that again. That we should be able to sort of look at ourselves and evaluate our behavior, go, maybe that wasn't so smart, to be quite so hysterical in our response to things, and to allow really sort of a collective delusional, and by the way, whether you put delusion on Q or delusion on Nazis or delusion on, there's lots of delusional stuff going around, believe me. It wasn't one delusion. There was just tendencies towards that kind of thing. Ralph, I've been talking about molnupiravir for quite a lot of this thread, and I'm very excited about it. I think we're going to have real good data from that. We'll see. I was talking to Steve Kirsch about how the press was suppressing any enthusiasm or excitement about the results. So I thought that was odd and weird. Because I do think once the phase 3 is underway, you're going to see it'll probably be terminated prematurely because it'd be unethical to continue given how positive the results are probably going to be. Yeah, Ilana says the U.S. never admits they did anything wrong. I agree with you. Politicians never admit they do anything wrong, and that's awful. That's sort of disgusting. We all do things wrong. We all make mistakes, and we should update our priorities. We should adjust our mistakes and move forward. Do I think it's okay to get a vaccine during freezing? I don't know about that, Nicole. I don't know. You have to talk to your doctor about that. Probably okay. Don't know, though. Is the organization putting together a COVID response report on what we learned so far? Crazy Mook, that is a great idea. I would hope that somebody would take a look at that and do some sort of retrospective analysis. It would be probably healing and probably helpful. But I don't know if they'd be honest about how crazy we got. Because I don't know how they would quantify that. Let's see. Tons of effective treatment for COVID, so why the next one to be the one? Okay. It's not going to matter. There are tons of effective treatments for COVID, so why would the next one be the one? Terry, this one has a different quality to it. This is a specific antiviral and takes antiviral production down to 0. So it solves multiple problems. It prevents viral replication, which is where the variants are coming from, so we reduce the risk of that problem. That's a major epidemiological issue, number one. Number two, if you suppress the viral reproduction earlier, very early and massively, you don't get the inflammatory phase. And we can't do that yet. Even the monoclonal antibodies don't really do that quite that same way. Number three, it's specific to this virus in a way that nothing else is. So, it really, that's why I'm excited about it. And, again, in the preliminary data, it took the amount of virus being produced in the nasopharynx down to 0. 0. Not a 30% reduction, not a 90% reduction, 0. Patty, I've not been vaccinated yet. Okay, the doctor said there's no harm in the eggs. Good. I would think that would be right. I've not been vaccinated yet. I've been getting something called an Additic score, which is a company I work for. I'm having my next score tomorrow morning. And I'll find out, again, what my antibodies have been. They've been way above vaccinated level. Comparing me to vaccinated patients, I'm way over. Plus, I had antibodies against multiple other antigens than merely the spike protein, so I'm extra covered and probably covered against the variants, so it hasn't been proved yet. That's a possibility. And they're also assessing my cellular immunity, but I've not seen those data yet. And I think it's because people are using veterinary ivermectin, and that's been a catastrophe. People should not be doing that. Okay, husband has cardiomyopathy. Okay, this is Jenna. Husband had cardiomyopathy, nearly died. He's 30, very healthy and fit, but does his medical history put him at risk if he gets COVID? Jenna, I don't know that unless he's on an immunosuppressive of some type for if he had a cardiac transplant. I don't know you didn't include that here. I don't see that he'd be in a special risk category necessarily. So, Susan, are we good to go here? The antiviral molnupiravir. Let me see if I can find it here exactly. Make sure I have it. People want me to spell. Oh, good.
How do you spell it?
I'm going to spell it. Nupavir. I think it's right. Let me see if I get it right.
No more questions on the Clubhouse?
It's MOL.
Tell them that we're going to go.
Okay, Clubhouse, I'm sorry. My dog is here. He comes in when it's time to go every time. Yeah, I see you. He runs in here and has a whole time with me. I don't see any. Oh, there is a hand up, so let me go. I'll ask her, but let me spell molnupiravir first. MOLNUPIARVIR. MOLNUPIRAVIR. Let's see. Invite to speak. I think it's Clint, if I heard the name right. Clint. Hey, buddy, what's happening?
Not much.
Oh, wait.
Just keeping them high and tight, as
Hey,
always.
well done.
And,
Well done.
I have a question. It's layered, so I'll try to keep it as short as possible. But essentially, the pandemic has made everyone crazy, and especially my family, like my mother, my father, my sister, they've become anti-vaxxers, Trump is going to take the office back over and all that crazy stuff. And it seems like you'd think that maybe after the election, after all this stuff, they'd start coming back to some kind of reality, but we haven't seen that happen, me and my other sisters. So we're trying to figure out, what do we do? My sister's expecting a baby, so she wants them to get the COVID vaccine, but it just seems impossible to talk them into this at this point. Is there any...
Wait, she is getting the vaccine or she's not getting the vaccine?
My sister is pregnant, and she wants my parents to get the vaccine, so she'll be able to visit them eventually.
And what is there... I mean... Look, people have studied, cognitive psychologists have studied people that have strong anti-vax feelings. And you can often convince people that are anti-vaxxers that a particular vaccine is okay or appropriate or important. They've shown data whereby they were able to get people to proceed with, say, the measles vaccine. But what you'll find is once you convince someone that one particular vaccine is safe and appropriate, they will double down everywhere else. It's called the backfire effect. Now, that's not
a... be more anti-vax.
Right. And that's not a universal thing. It's actually a controversial topic, backfire effect, but there does tend to be a backfire. So the one way you can approach this is talk about not vaccines, but worldview, right? Thank you, Leopold. But worldview, like what would have to be the case? Is there anything that would have to change about your feelings about the world if you were to believe this was safe? Or what is it about the world that leads you to believe that these are unsafe? And sort of talk more generally about their worldview and why they're so untrusting and why that gets focused here. Sometimes that helps. You can sort of get through and talk about your worldview and how things would have to be if you adopted their worldview. And then the other thing that tends to go along with that is they tend to attach themselves to similarly minded community members. And they have tight relationships with them. And they could get ostracized from the community that you're asking them to sort of go against, right? whether it's flat earth or vaccine, whatever it is, you usually are hanging out with people of similar mindset that would reject you if you stepped out of their belief system. So you have to move away from the specifics and then go back to the biology afterwards. Start talking, make sure they actually understand the biology in effect, in reality. They're not worried about, tell them how messenger RNA works, what a ribosome is, that kind of stuff, and arm them with facts. Does that sound good?
I've done many of those things.
Oh. Okay.
The only real thing that, even come at him like, Trump was the one that helped make this vaccine,
Yeah.
I've tried it from every angle. And the only real person, it's just the three of them really. And, maybe an uncle will jump in or something like that as well.
Yeah.
But, people they thought were crazy. Like my dad used to think his brother was crazy. And now he's like that. He's got it right.
Well, I think
reptilian type, they're falling into like crazier and crazier conspiracy.
At a certain point, you have to let people go. Unfortunately, you can't. But there's a great podcast out there that addresses cognitive distortions. It's called "You Are Not So Smart," and you can if you look up. I don't know if he gets into it on Dunning-Kruger or where he around the Dunning-Kruger series he did. He gets into these kinds of. I think he has a conspiracy theory segment. That's what it is. And go listen to that podcast. See if you come up with any other ideas after listening to him. And I did a couple of good podcasts with a guy that's going to come on the stream here. It's Susan. I always blank on his name. Sapersky, Dr. Sapersky, right?
Okay.
Susan Pinsky?
That's a name I've never heard.
Okay.
What does he do?
The cognitive psychologist I asked you to book for the stream.
Yeah, I haven't booked him yet, so I can't remember.
Sapersky. Gleb Sapersky. Dr. Gleb Sapersky, look for his stuff.
Why do doctors have such hard names?
Susan, if you don't have his info, it really worries me and bothers me.
All right. All right. Why don't you chide me on a live stream? Thanks.
No, I'm not. I don't mean it like that. It means I feel worried what else we're missing that I
There's
intend.
a lot. Trust me.
All right. It makes me feel insecure. That's all I'm saying.
I know.
Also, is Monica Ricci out there somewhere on the restream? Because
I haven't seen her today.
Her stuff keeps bouncing back to me. I can't communicate with her, and she's sending me all this medical information that I would like to respond to that I cannot. So any of you communicate with Monica, tell her her email does not work for me, and I'd like to be able to respond to her. So whatever that means. All right, you guys. So we got to wrap this thing up so I can go do one of my last
say goodbye to everybody on
thank you guys on Clubhouse. Did a great job today.
We have to fix the oh no, you wrote Worthy right on there. Thank you.
Thank you, Clubhouse. We appreciate you guys listening and being a
tomorrow we're going to have a
participator.
guy on that's fighting the school board. Remember he wanted to come on last week. He actually didn't get back to me until today and said he could do today, but we had already
Where is he fighting a school board?
Remember, he's the one that went through Gary and wanted to.
Yes.
What they were going. I guess they went out and hit the streets this weekend. We're going to hear about that tomorrow because I guess your schedule opened up a little bit. And then Thursday we have a Dr. Zubin Damania. He's Dr. Z-Dog, MD. You might remember him from when we did the Rubin report, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's all set to go. And then on Friday, we have the seat guy, Raja. I don't know how to say that, but Raja.
So we're going to talk about gut health and gut.
We're going to open with
biology.
that, and we're going to talk about traveling and your guts, and then we're going to have the points guy. I don't know if anybody knows who this guy is, Brian Kelly. We're going to talk about travel.
Yeah, I think people. I've noticed people want to move around.
And
travel is something people want now, and so we're going to talk about how to do that.
I want to talk about travel. So this is all about me. So we're going to fix your gut, and we're going to get on a plane and take a cruise. We're going to do something like that.
Yes.
And then then also next week we have the following Ask Dr. Drew. So the Ask Dr. Drew is E-Dog, and then we're going to have Eliza Blue. We have her set up for the following week. She is going to talk about sex trafficking. So we're going to, we have a few topics coming up, pretty good ones. Anyways, I know nobody can hear me on Clubhouse. I'm sorry.
Clubhouse, I already left.
Oh,
I
okay.
went out of Clubhouse.
But thanks to everybody on Restream, and thanks for not being mad because I haven't booked that doctor that Drew wants.
Oh, I'm not mad. I'm not mad. It just struck me. I thought, I'd forgotten about it. And that makes me feel
Tomorrow,
insecure.
girls, we're going to talk about getting the kids back to school and what happened in LA and how what's going down. I think some of the schools are opening. New York's opening in mid-April, so that's good news. I heard that on the news. So, anyways, that's it. I have been trying to book guests.
Good. Oh, no, I know you've been working very hard. Don't get me wrong.
Eliza is a part of the Locals constituency. So
I'm
she's on Locals. So everybody who's on Locals, you might recognize her from there.
And she has been a child who was trafficked or sex work?
She experienced it, yeah.
So she can talk about how to get out and that sort of thing?
Yeah, she's a big advocate,
Great.
very popular, and she
Great.
helps a lot of people.
Great. That's a very complicated, very interesting topic.
And then we're going to also have the woman who was part of the, who was the guy that had the island with all the girls on it? Epstein. One of his girls is going to come on after her the following week. I really like this topic because it kind of wraps in with the book you wrote about consent and teaching women how to make boundaries and protect themselves in these crazy times. I'm having nightmares. I want everybody to be safe.
I had nightmares all last night. Very strange behavioral.
You were snoring
very
again.
uncharacteristic
I had a
behavior
pillow
in my
over your
dreams.
head, and it still was resonating. But I'm glad you're sleeping well.
Thank you. All right. Well, listen, let's wrap this thing up. We will see you tomorrow. And again, tomorrow is, you've confused me with all the different people, is the school topic.
Tomorrow's the guy, I don't have his band or his name because he didn't get back to me until today, and I don't remember his name. But he wanted to be on the Dr. Drew podcast. He was trying to get some promotion for the advocacy to get kids back to school, and he's a producer, remember? He's a producer, and
yes,
I don't know. He's just he's
interested in this, so we'll see what's going. I'm sure it's going to be all about LA Unified School District because we are of the 10 largest school districts in the country. They're all open except ours. There you go.
I know, and and then they want to make sure that they vaccinate everybody, but a lot of people don't need to, and they are making them do it, and it's just going to take forever. So.
We'll see. All right, everybody, thank you so much for being here, and we will see you tomorrow around the same time.
Okay. Let me see if I can find me an ad.
Oh, wait a minute. We won't be here tomorrow. Susan?
Wait, you canceled After Dark.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Oh, okay. I got a thing that said you canceled After Dark.
No.
And that it was all open. Okay, well, I'll tell him it'll have to wait until
So tomorrow I have to meet with Christina to do After Dark. You should check that out. But we can be on Thursday.
Well, Thursday we have Z-Dog, so okay,
Yeah.
I'll tell this guy we can't have him on.
Yeah, we're gonna have to miss that one, I'm afraid. So, and by the time this week is over, there will be some sort of agreement between the LA Unified School District and this teachers union. The teachers union has been the problem. So
I could have pulled him in today just to talk.
But it's okay. It's fine. Sorry about the scheduling stuff. So, all right. So we will see you on.
I know. I could have sworn you canceled it.
Look at my schedule. I'm looking at it right now.
Maybe it was another week. I just got it mixed up.
Yeah, it's all right. But again, we'll see you on Thursday. Correction.
Yes.
Thursday.
Okay.
See you then. I am so grateful for our friends at Blue Microphones. Not only have they completely changed what our show sounds like, they've given me headphones so I can monitor things better. This is the mic for millions of creative people, and now I know why. I'm so grateful for them completely changing the quality of our audio. You'll find Blue mics like Yeti and the Mouse, which we're using here, both in pro studios and home studios, literally all over the world. Their popular Yeti caster is a Blue Yeti microphone, plus a boom arm system that's behind many of your favorite podcasts. I run into them all the time, and now I know why. If you've ever thought about creating your own podcast or YouTube channel, Blue can make you sound and look great. Just visit bluemic.com and click Get Started, and you can start telling your story. As we're gradually moving back to opening schools and businesses and, of course, our in-person interactions, I want to remind you, this is all time with cold and flu season getting going. Staying hydrated is key to helping your body deal with the added stress and with the upcoming flu season. My regular fans have heard me talk about a product called Hydrolite for a long time now. It's an amazing rapid rehydration drink. It's a mix that, well, we're obsessed with here. I'm excited to announce they've just released Hydrolyte Plus Immunity, just in time for cold and flu season. Hydrolyte Plus Immunity starts with their fast absorbing electrolytes and adds a host of immune boosting ingredients. Each single serve, easy pour drink mix contains 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C and 300 milligrams of elderberry extract, creates what is hopefully immune boosting formula that's high in antioxidants and zinc. Combining this with Hydrolyte's 7 key electrolytes, it's a fantastic way to stay proactive and properly hydrated. Hydrolyte Plus Immunity comes in convenient, easy to pour powder sticks that rapidly dissolve in water and make a great tasting drink that has 75% less sugar than your typical sports drink. It uses all natural flavors and it is gluten-free, dairy-free, caffeine-free, non-GMO, and it is vegan. And you can find Hydrolyte Plus by visiting hydrolyte.com/Dr. Drew. Again, that's HYDRALYTE.com/DRDRW. And be sure to use our code Dr. Drew 25 at checkout for a special discount.